Here we are talking about prayer, and we're going to quote Lily Tomlin. Here's what Lily says. For fast-acting relief, try slow down. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Christian Questions Talk Radio with your breakfast with Jonathan and Rick. The objective of our program is to discuss with you, our listeners, thought-provoking and meaningful topics based on the Bible. It's a call-in format. We're caller-friendly, and we'd like to hear from you. And, Jonathan, what are we talking about?
Well, Rick, our question this morning is, what makes prayer work? And our theme text is found in Acts chapter 16, verse 13. And on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made.
And we spent some time in the first hour talking about a number of aspects of prayer. Before we get into that, though, Jonathan, I know you're looking at me like saying, don't start.
For those that want to check us out on the web, it's christianquestions.net, and there is a delay, so if you call in, know that, be aware. And there are archive programs to listen to, about 300 available, and use them for personal Bible study. And if you have any questions or comments, contact us on the web.
Very good. And it's kind of cool to be able to do that. We love to hear from you in terms of your reactions and so forth. So this morning, again, our subject is what makes prayer work. In the first hour, we looked at some of the structure of prayer as laid out in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6. And we looked at there were 5 orders of business in that. Let's just quickly review them. What were they? Just rattle them off.
Glorify God our Father, pray for the plan of God to unfold, petition for basic needs, being forgiven and forgiving, and seeking God's overruling and protection.
So, and then we talked about prayer, what do we have to bring to the table? And the first thing we mentioned, besides faith, was sincerity.
Right.
And in one of the scriptures we quoted, Jonathan, that I just want to elaborate on just a little bit more, it was talking about sometimes we don't have the words, but that's okay. And I think that's an important point for those of us who feel like, because sometimes we get stuck, we see so much of our own sin and fallibility. We see so much of how fallen we are. We feel like we're not worthy. And you know what? You're right. We're not. And don't let that get in the way of that sincere communication, though. Even if you don't have the words and you don't feel like you can be eloquent, it's the sincerity that God is looking for. And we can learn if we give that sincere expression. And I think that's such an important thing because sometimes I know of people who want to be able to pray but are almost afraid of it because it's overwhelming to them. What do I say? Well, the first point is if you have that sincerity, just make an attempt. Move forward, and God can bless and direct you. So we talked about sincerity as the first thing to bring to the table. What's next?
Honesty. Living faithfully and righteous enables our prayers to be heard.
That's important. Living faithfully and righteously enables our prayers to be heard. Okay? And folks, again, if you have a thought, it's 860-442-9956, 442-WXLM. Couple of scriptures.
Proverbs 15, verses 6 through 9. In the house of the righteous there is much treasure, but trouble befalls the income of the wicked. The lips of the wise spread knowledge, not so the minds of fools. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves the one who pursues righteousness.
So living honestly is one of those things that puts us into the context of being able to communicate with God. This is a very, very pointed scripture. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord. So if you, through wickedness, are offering up sacrifices to God to show some kind of piety to cover up your wickedness, that is not received by God well. It says it's an abomination. But it says the prayer of the upright is God's delight. So if we're seeking to live honestly...
Reminds me of King Saul.
Yeah.
When he offered the sacrifice when he wasn't supposed to.
Right. And then when Samuel came to him, he's justifying
exactly. He was being dishonest with his sacrifice. And
he was cast out as a result. Mm-hmm. That's pretty dramatic stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so having that sincerity and that honesty is such an important part of our ability to communicate with God. Next scripture.
Psalms 32, 1 through 8. Happy are those whose transgressions is forgiven, whose sin is covered.
And as you read this psalm, let's just remember, this particular psalm is one of those psalms that King David wrote after his gross sins with the murder of Uriah and the taking of Bathsheba and all of that stuff. So this is David's assessment of himself and his condition afterwards.
Happy are those whose transgressions is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Happy are those to whom the Lord imputes no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. While I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groanings all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me, my strength was dried up, as by the heat of summer. Selah. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Selah. Therefore let all who are faithful offer prayer to you at a time of distress. The rush of mighty waters shall not reach them. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of deliverance. Selah. I will instruct you and teach you the way you shall go. I will counsel you with mine eye upon you.
And Jonathan, we're talking about honesty and being honest with God here, and there's a dramatic difference in David. In verse 3, he says, when I kept silence, in other words, when I wasn't confessing my sins, when I was trying to hide it, trying to justify it, trying to rationalize it, trying to forget it ever existed, just trying to move on and say it's okay, I'm not going to deal with that. And how often do we get into that situation? He says, when I kept silence, my body wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me, and my strength was dried up. He was dying inside.